Our trivia question from sportsNOLA.com. The Saints welcome the Falcons Thursday night football. 8 previous times the Saints have played on Thursdays. How many have been at home? I say A, Ricky said C, Brian said D. None of us picked B. Watch that be the answer. Actually, I got it. There we go. The Falcons in 92, the Vikings in 2010, which of course kicked off the season after the Super Bowl year. That turned out to be a defensive struggle of all things with Brett Favre and Drew Brees going against each other. That was an exciting time in New Orleans Saints history. Not so much now, based upon what's happening. That seems like a long time ago, based upon what we're watching now, unfortunately, because none of us wants to see this. We all want to see the New Orleans Saints succeed. Definitely, clearly. If they succeed in the future, our hot seat topic today surrounds this question. Will they succeed with Sean Payton? Will Sean Payton be with the New Orleans Saints in 2016? Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Trahan, as always. And as usual, I'm going to answer this 2 ways. If he wants to be, yes. Should he be? No. I remember, and I wrote this for sportsNOLA.com, Jim Mora, I had a long conversation with Jim, a couple years after his departure here in '96. And if you remember, he abruptly resigned 8 games into the '96 season. We talked about this before. It's his 11th season, and he was talking about how there's always a time that a coach knows when it's either time to move on, time to make a change. And he was using a 10-year figure in the NFL. Again, this was his 11th season. Looking back on it, he said he probably could have left a year or 2 earlier, because you can see the handwriting on the wall. Now, they had some transitional changes in the front office, of course, with Jim Finks' passing back in those years. So they had some dynamics change in the front office, much like a little bit like what's happening here. I think that Sean Payton will be here as long as he wants to be. But I also think that Sean Payton is smart enough to know that there'll be a time when it's time to move on. He's now in his 9th season with the Saints. I do think this. I think he's taken them as far as he can go. He's done a great job. He's taken them to a Super Bowl championship, a first in franchise history. But there comes a time when the message is no longer getting through. There's a time when the troops aren't listening. That message falls on deaf ear. And there's a time when it is time for him to perhaps consider another change. And I think we are, in his words, I'm going to use his vernacular, that time is sooner rather than later.
Well, I hear what you're saying, Brian, but you know, you're just talking about what falling on deaf ears. I mean, the players that they got, I don't care if you blow a tuba, it can't, I mean, ain't nothing they can do with those players. So, you know what I mean, Coach Payton is a coach that he needs players. And if he got players, you can see what he can do. He showed you that already. So, but without players, I don't care how great a coach you is, you can't beat people. And you can come up with schemes, but if a guy way better than you on the other side of the ball, he can stop you. And that's what the Saints are going through. But he's a great coach. He can be here next year if he want to be. But I tell you, the way these fans is and the way the game going, you got to win. New Orleans people is vicious when you don't win. They don't care for losing too much.
Let's just point to the reports on ESPN yesterday prior to the game that the Miami Dolphins, among others, other teams, may approach the Saints about inquiring into Sean's availability. Sean has 2 years left on a contract after this season, and he'll be making approximately $8 million per year. Okay, if it takes 2 to tango in a trade, Mr. Benson would have to listen to any kind of overtures from another team. There may be some college teams also come calling at the end of the season. He's a hot commodity. I am not dismissing the fact that he's a good coach. I'm just saying there is a time for all to move on, okay? He's not long here. He's not going to retire here, I don't believe.
Well, you seen Harbaugh. I mean, look what he's doing in Michigan now. I mean, he left San Francisco. He couldn't get along with management. Now he took Michigan. He's doing a great job. So Coach Payton would do the same thing wherever he lands.
Well, I take exception just to something you said, Ricky, real quick, is that Sean is in charge of the personnel. He may not have that GM tag, but Sean Payton is picking who he wants on this team, Ricky.
Well, I can't say that. I can't say that.
I'm saying it. You don't have to.
All those players on this team, I wouldn't say he picking all the players, because I know some of these guys that on this team, coach don't want some of these guys. Some of these guys been picked by other people. That's what I believe.
Okay, well, you know, again, going back, I think that at some point, you know, there's going to be further speculation, particularly if this team stays in this downward spiral. So, you know what? I wrote for sportsNOLA.com. I think you could see a changing of the guard at the end of the season. I'm saying could. I think Drew Brees could be gone, and I think Sean Payton could be gone.
Well, these are all interesting points, well discussed. The question was, will Sean Payton be here in 2016? And my answer would be yes. He's got 2 years left on his contract, unless someone is willing to trade to get him, which means giving up a #1 draft pick. Does someone want him that badly? You have to ask yourself the question. Where there's smoke, there's fire. The information's out there for a reason. It's been put out there. Who puts it out there? Agents. There's a reason for that. Miami, Indianapolis, the University of Texas. You think it's just someone speculating, just throwing something out there against a fan, seeing if it sticks? Of course not. It's being put out there by people, therefore there's some smoke to it. I don't know if the fire is going to burn, because ultimately someone would have to give something up. He's not only under contract for 2 years, but he's under a massive contract, being paid enormously well by an organization that he's been good to, and that's been really good to him. So ultimately, I still think he's here. But here's the problem, and Ricky can relate to it, because Brian invoked Jim Moore's name, and what happened there? He stayed too long. Here's why he stayed too long: because they made bad personnel decisions. Do you see the parallel? It exists here again. History is, in fact, repeating itself. From Ricky Jackson to Stan Brock to Morton Anderson to Sam Mills to Vaughn Johnson to Bobby Hebert to Eric Martin, and then, of course, Jimmy Wilkes, Hobie Brenner, Frank Warren getting older. They didn't replace those guys. Most recently, Jonathan Vilma, Will Smith, Jabari Greer, Devery Henderson, Darren Sproles, Reggie Bush. Then you're talking about Moore, you're talking about Pierre Thomas, you're talking about Deuce McAllister. Have the Saints replaced those guys? No. Same kind of situation. And as a result, you end up with the same kind of result. Will he be here next year? My guess is yes. But don't hold me to it. When we return in just a moment, college football as Sports NOLA TV continues on WHNO TV 20.